Hello and welcome to Cryptid by State, Texas. Today we are returning to the ever-popular Cryptid by State series with our 8th entry. This time we are taking a look at the unknown creatures that are said to roam about the state of Texas. This area was highly requested for quite some time now, but the votes didn't allow it to be looked at up until this point. Every time I make one of these videos, there seems to be a bit of confusion in the comment section. I frequently see people telling me I forgot a particular cryptid, or that I didn't talk about a state's most famous one. This series isn't meant to be a complete guide to cryptids in each state, so I do have to leave a few out. I wish I had time to make a complete guide, since that seems to be an area that is quite lacking in the cryptid world. With all that out of the way, let's get back to our road trip across the country as we head to our next stop in Texas. Texas has quite an expansive and interesting history. Officially, the area that is the topic of this video was first encountered by Spanish explorer Alonso Alvarez de Pineda in 1520 when he was searching for a passage between the Gulf of Mexico and Asia. At first, the Spanish weren't all that interested in the land, but in 1685 they learned that the French had set up a structure called Fort St. Louis near Matagorda Bay. Assuming this settlement to be a threat, the Spanish sent out 10 expeditions to find the fort and destroy it. After 3 years of searching and many men lost, they finally arrived at the fort, only to find it already destroyed, due to a battle that arose between the French settlers and the Crocotta tribe over the settlers taking a canoe and not paying for it. The Spanish then regained an interest in holding the area of Texas in 1690. Which they kept control of until 1821. In that year, Spain lost control of Texas during the Mexican War for Independence. On October 2, 1835, the Texas settlers revolted against Mexico in the Battle of Gonzales, and on March 2, 1836, they drafted the Texas Declaration of Independence, stating that they were now the Republic of Texas. On December 29, 1845, Texas became the 28th state to join the United States. What makes this all unique is that even though there was much war and blood loss, one of the slogans of the state is "Six Flags Over Texas." This symbolism is seen in a lot of locations in the area, but it stands for the 6 nations that had at one point or another had control of Texas. This being Spain, France, Mexico, Republic of Texas, the United States, and the Confederacy. This slogan is the basis for the fairly popular theme parks known as Six Flags, which has its headquarters in Grand Prairie, Texas. Unfortunately, none of the Native American cattle in Confederacy are represented as one of the 6. It should be noted that the name Texas actually comes from the Caddoan word Tejas, which means friends, and as such, one of the state's mottos is friendship. Although it has been argued that the name Tejas is actually Spanish for a yew tree. Now, one of my favorite parts is talking about the flags. Texas had quite a few flags in its history, but the one we are familiar with has a debate as to who actually designed it, but many point to a man named Peter Craig. The current version is actually from the Republic of Texas from 1839, but officially became the state flag on August 31st, 1933. It is said that up until 1933, Texas was considered to not have a flag. The design has many symbolisms, with the blue meaning loyalty, red courage, white purity, and the single star meaning that it represents everyone from Texas. Although it should be noted that the lone star and that famous moniker predates the flag, and was to represent Texas's fight for its freedom from Mexico. Okay, I see I got too far into the state's history, so I really need to get this back onto cryptids. With a list of cryptids that I want to talk about, it is hard for me to really figure out which one I want to start with, as they're all fairly interesting. So, starting off, there have been quite a few reports of a creature that is normally found in the legends of India, but has been seen in Texas and is known as the Crocotta. At first I didn't pay much mind to this one until I really started reading up on it, and it certainly isn't an honorable mention. This creature is said to look like a mix between a dog, wolf, and hyena. Even as such, it is said to be the size of a mule, it has cloven hooves for feet, and has a mane like a horse. Its fur varies, but can be seen as yellow, tan, or black, and in some instances it has spots. Its eyes are said to come in many colors as well, and its jaws are very powerful. What makes this creature unique is the fact that it is said to have the ability to mimic a human voice. It utilizes this ability to act as a cry for help, luring its victims to their demise. In some instances, it has been reported that the creature will even call out its victim's name. Many assume that this being is telepathically able to gather this information, whereas other evidence point to it finding out the name by simply stalking its prey's house. I mention this because one of its main food sources is sheep and cattle, but it also has a taste for dogs and, of course, human flesh. In this, it will mimic the human voice, drawing the dog to them. After that, it will then call out to the human, and the results are the same. To me, it feels like this creature hangs around a property long enough to make their hunt successful. Although in some variations, this beast does possess an odd set of abilities where it can somehow paralyze its victims just by looking at them. This creature acts similar to a few others in that if it can't find live prey, it will go to graveyards and dig up the tombs. Adding to the part of it stalking one household, there are claims that this creature lives in caves or abandoned homes. I have to wonder if the homes were always abandoned or if their activity caused it to be such. Interestingly, there are some that theorize that this creature is actually a hyena that has the ability to mimic human speech, much like a parrot. Moving on to a fairly short but equally interesting story, we start with the creature seen around Big Bend National Park, and it is called the mountain boomer. Many people from Texas know that the name mountain boomer refers to a reptile known as the eastern collared lizard, but that version only grows to about a foot long. The one I'm referencing is always described as being around 5 to 7 feet tall and resembles something that you would see on Jurassic Park. From what I can tell, these creatures aren't bloodthirsty, but they are said to look like a form of Thescelosaurus, but only smaller due to those dinosaurs being around 8 to 15 feet tall. The boomer can come in all types of colors, but for the most part, the males are normally brighter. They are said to make their home in burrows and are very shy and try to avoid all human contact. They have 2 very powerful back legs that make them able to avoid capture from predators. As a strange adaptation, they are said to have the ability to make a wolf-like howl. I'm not sure if this is to confuse predators or if it is just how they naturally sound. From what I found, there have been a handful of sightings, but all are brief. In 1970, a man claimed that one of these creatures actually hit his car, causing him to veer off the road, but the creature escaped. In 1990, another person claimed that they came across this creature standing on the road, apparently making a meal of roadkill. As the car came closer, the being lifted up its head and took off into the forest. I'm not sure about this one, but I thought I would mention it since I do have a soft spot for the idea of some dinosaurs being around. With our next cryptid, we have a real treat, since it is known by many names, and due to this, made it really confusing as to if it was the same thing. Some call it a pterodon, or maybe it is a thunderbird, but it has all been simplified to being known as Big Bird. No, not that one. This creature is quite different from most descriptions of a thunderbird. Even though it has the size, the face is said to resemble that of a gorilla. Most see this being as simply a shadow in the night sky, but others have had more terrifying encounters. Sightings first started around Rio Grande Valley in 1976, when 2 police officers stated they saw an extremely large black bird flying over their squad car. At the time, the wingspan was said to be around 10 feet wide. A few days later, 2 girls named Tracy Lawson and Jackie Davies were outside their house when they noticed a 5-foot-tall bird-like creature with the face of a gorilla standing in a nearby drainage ditch. The creature appeared to just be watching them, which obviously frightened the girls. They ran inside to tell their parents, but when they returned to the spot, the bird was gone, but had left behind a set of 3-toed prints. In Brownsville on January 7th, a man named Alberto Guajardo was in his home when he suddenly heard the sound of something large hitting his house. Alberto grabbed a knife and ran outside, only to find out that what had made the sound was a 5-foot-tall bird-like creature with red eyes, that he would later claim looked like nothing from this world. In Raymondville, Armando Grimaldo was standing outside his house smoking a cigarette when he started to hear the loud sound of wings flapping. He looked up in time to see a large black bird flying down on him. This bird grabbed a hold of him with its feet and tried to take off with him, but Armando managed to escape. Neighbors rushed over to check on him and saw that he had large scratches and his shirt was torn open. According to the story, he was sent to Willacy County Hospital to be treated for shock. Officer Arturo Padilla from San Benito reported seeing a large black bird-like creature with a wingspan of 12 feet cross in front of his police cruiser. Not to be outdone, there is another similar creature that many claim to be either a gargoyle, mothman, or something entirely different. This creature is man-sized, has red eyes and wings like a bat, but most all describe it as being more man-like than animal. A lot of sightings of this creature come from McAllen. In one story, a man was in his garden when he noticed that the neighborhood dogs had suddenly started to go crazy. He looked around and didn't see anything, but when he turned his gaze skyward, he saw a large man-sized creature flapping its wings, just hovering in the air. He said it had gray skin and its face was almost human-like. In a similar story, a woman named Wilma claimed that while sitting at her home at night, she heard a dog start barking outside. She turned on the porch light and pulled back the curtain to look at what was causing the trouble, and was terrified to see a large human-sized creature with bat-like wings standing in her yard. All the while, it had a hold of her dog. At the sight of the light, the creature took off. Wilma ran outside to check on her dog, who seemed to be fine. The next day, she again went out to check the yard and saw really odd prints in the dirt. In taking a closer look at her dog, she noticed that it had small needle-like punctures in the skin around where the creature had a hold of it. Adding to this is a story from 1986 that, from what I can tell, isn't just some random scary story. A man named Frank Shaw was working at the NASA Johnson Space Center in Houston. One night as he was leaving to go to his car, he happened to look up and noticed a large black-winged figure perched on the roof of a nearby building. It was described as looking exactly like a gargoyle, and its wings were wrapped around it like a cape. The two stood there watching each other for a while, and Frank stated he got the feeling that the creature seemed to enjoy the terror it was inflicting. It then began to unfurl its wings, which made a dry crackling sound, and it finally spread them out with a snap. Frank took that hint and ran to his car. As he got inside, he heard the creature take off with a loud whooshing sound. Frank drove quickly down the road to his house, all the while too terrified to look back to see if the being was following him. Later at work, he debated over telling his boss about what had happened, but he finally relented. After doing so, they informed him that others had seen the same creature, and in fact, 2 of the facility's German Shepherds were found mangled in the same area previously. In this meeting, he was told that a secret file had been kept on the sightings, but they weren't disclosing anything more. A few days later, NASA officials from Arizona visited Frank and interrogated him on his encounter. Once the meeting was over, he was informed that it would be best for him and his family's well-being to not mention this to anyone. As of such, he did as they wished, and the only ones he told was his family. In 2004, his daughter Desiree decided to share the story with cryptozoologist and author Nick Redfern. I'm not sure if this story can be backed up or not, but as it stands, it is interesting, and I did see where Nick did in fact write about this encounter. As usual, I couldn't include all the cryptids that are said to roam about Texas, but I did want to include a few of them as honorable mentions. Before getting into that, I do want to at least state that there are quite a few Bigfoot and Chupacabra sightings as well. Now with this, I would like to mention the Lake Worth monster, which, for all descriptions, is a goat man. The problem is that there is quite a bit of evidence pointing to it being a hoax. In saying that, there are other similar reports of goatmen type creatures in the state as well. Moving on to another interesting cryptid comes the reports from a police officer from Mission, Texas, who came across a being that can only be described as being a human-sized cat person. From what I could find, there was only one report of this, but I suppose if there are goatmen and dogmen, then there could very easily be a catman. There also has been sightings of giant alligators in Lake Travis, and their stories resemble those from the movie Lake Placid. The final one I'll mention is the strange one known as the Beast of Bear Creek from Kimball County, which varies in description from being a large cat or simply being a form of Bigfoot. I should note that black panthers are claimed to be seen all over the state, so who knows. I also wanted to mention that I wanted to talk about the donkey lady as well as the lechuza, but both seem to fall more into the realm of spirits. I will say that there are apparently a ton of sightings of the lechuza though. I hope you enjoyed this entry in the Cryptid by State series, and I hope it made Texas proud. Since there was so much to cover, I can't include a 3 comments I love section, but I promise to include it next time. If you haven't yet done so, do please consider subscribing to my channel for more content like this. Also, I'd greatly appreciate it if you could share my videos with someone you know who may be interested in this type of genre. With that, be safe, and I'll see you in the next one. Later!